We've talked a lot about the plants in the Book of Nature and our processes for looking at these windows. You've seen the wheel and the 12 different pieces of this kaleidoscope of the plant, showing us that plants are really, multidimensional, just as humans are. We all have these different facets of our parts, pieces and parts of what makes us us. In these windows with the plant, this summarizes all 12 of them. If you haven't gotten through the self-study, you'll see that. And you don't have to read all of this. I'll be putting this presentation in the course and um, creating some cheat sheet documents for you. But just to run through it real quickly, we've talked a lot about the form and gesture and the plant signature, how it's oriented in space, if it has any resonance to geometry and shapes and numbers. We've talked and looked through some of the plant families and how they can give us some hints to the nature of that plant. We look at their seasonal cycles, their daily cycles, if they have any kind of rhythm related to day and night. And if they have a relationship to the environment, where it grows, where it thrives, where it's from, where it's now growing, all of those things, if it's on a mountain, if it's in a prairie, r- really inform part of the personality of that plant. And then we might see what elements of the earth, air, fire, and water are predominant by looking at the plant. That could be subjective and open to a lot of interpretation, but we're looking at what elemental forces are we seeing when we look at the plant. And then what they call kingdoms of nature, minerals, animals, and even humans have relationships with that plant. Sometimes those can be mutually beneficial, sometimes they can be destructive, or both, or somewhere in between. Those all help us to see where that plant sits. The color, we'll go into all of these a little bit more. The color, what jumps out at you? What is notable about the color of that plant? And some of these remaining windows, the sense perceptions, we think, how does it smell? Does it have an aroma? How does it taste? Or how does it feel? And those, of course, if it's not toxic, and it's safe to do so, that can also give us information and give our body a way to experience the plant. When we get into more of the research focused parts of the windows, sometimes there may be resources that have already determined what chemical constituents that plant might contain. Now, not all plants have this, but some of the one I'm going to go through today absolutely does. And that can be really interesting. Also, the medicinal and herbal uses, that includes anything that we can learn about how that plant was used. And we just talked about that a little bit with mugwort because we really can use the information gleaned from the herbal use to get clues and hints and see patterns of the energy of the flower essence. And not just the herbal use, but essential oils. How is it used in homeopathy? How is it used by other flower? Maybe some other maker has made that flower essence and done research on it. And what do they say about it? It could be used also in food, in skincare, and that brings us to getting into the cultural aspects of the use. In the 12th window, we love to look at that. We love to look at what kind of ethnobotanical history does it have? Is it been in folk tales and myths? Is it used in magic? Is it used in shamanic ceremonies? These are all things to help us get to know the plant. And uh, in addition to that, we can attune to the plant. So they don't, FES doesn't call that one of the windows, but that is part of the practice of doing a plant study. and they call it imaginative perception. But there's various ways of attuning to the plant, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit more right now. FES, um, they have sort of an order, and just to go back a second, I always wondered why they numbered their windows 1 through 12, because I think about a plant multidimensionally. There are all these pieces. Why is it in this linear order? But when studying a plant, there is the idea that you want to do the observation first, the direct perception piece of that study, to try to be as objective as possible. I mean, you might already know about how it's used as an herb if it's a popular herb, and you just try to not think about that while you're in the observation mode. You want to have that beginner mind and use your sense of curiosity to see when you're doing a plant observation, when you are looking at its size and its shape and its orientation and all of those things, some of those first windows that are so much a part of the observation process. And then there's the time for softening our gaze a little bit, being a little bit more subjective. How do we experience the plant, and how does it make us feel? And that is attuning to that more subtle level. Where we can get insights, where we can go into this imaginal realm and perhaps um, experience some of the unseen aspects of reality. And this is where the colors, you might have observed the color of the flower when you were in objective mode, but when you're in this more feeling mode, it might seem more like an aura. You might feel and pick up on the energy of that color rather than just the simple fact, okay, this is the color red. In this case, it's like, well, how does this make me feel in context with all of the rest of the plant? And this is where it could be expanded to do shamanic work. I think using your sensory experience. There's a practice of, dietas or plant diets where, you take a very small period of time. And again, if it's not toxic, drinking the tea, if it's an herb, drinking the tea, taking the herb, putting it under your pillow. There's so many ways that you kind of just immerse yourself in the quality with that plant. And that gives a way to get to know it on a really deep, intimate level. And then the next step, the very last piece you want to do is your research. Except I do have an exception to that rule, and that is if you don't aren't 100% sure that you of the identity of the plant, you do want to do that first, because you can't touch it or taste it or anything like that if you don't have a 100% strong plant identification. So I would do, if I'm in the wild, it's not growing in my garden, and I've been observing a plant that I want to get to know better, I'm going to figure out what it is first and try not to look at anything else, but just enough information or research information to figure out what it is with some certainty. And then when we've done all of this, we can do more research. We can fill in all of these earlier parts that maybe we didn't know, or couldn't observe because we aren't trained botanists. Maybe we don't know how many of these little stigmas it has and all of those kinds of things. We don't really have to become botanists to get to know a plant. But if we want to learn more about those details, we can do it in research. Let's just do the research after we've done the observation. And so here's where some of those later windows come into play: the lore, the myths, the history, and the scientific studies and ritual uses. So to bring it all together, I want to just take one plant through all of the windows so we can quickly just see how it can come together. And in the first one, the form and gesture, the lavender is a bush. It's got tube shaped, it's got flowers that are considered bi-lipped or bilateral, because they have a top and a bottom part, but also they have a tube that's this sort of area here. Their bud kind of goes into a tube. So it's not a long one, but I think that's something to point out. And then also they emerge from the stem in a circular way, kind of like little crowns, going up the stem. So looking at that a little bit more closely in this geometric pattern, you can see here how they go around the stem like a crown. It's a circular whorl, and that goes up the stem. So that's sort of a circle. Looking at those two-lipped the bilateral petals. The thing about this kind of flower is you can't really tell it's technically two petals because it more so looks like five, because of the way that the indentations happen and the way that they're attached. So in a way, there's a star shape there. And with the stem, it's part of the Lamiaceae family. So they have square stems. That's what's notable. And that's another shape we might see with the lavender. And of course, that tall, long, strong vertical gesture upright is uh, is in particular noticeable. With this botanical family, it's the mint family, and it includes basil, mint, rosemary, oregano, all of those, a lot of herbs that you're probably very familiar with in your kitchens and medicinally. And there's quite a few species of lavender. So the one that FES, the Flower Essence Society, makes its essence from is the Angustifolia species, formerly called the Lavandula officinalis. Um, and there's many others in use commercially, like spike lavender and lavandin, and some of these others that might grow in gardens or you might be familiar with. I wanted to point out too that in the way the leaf structure is here, um, in addition to those square stems, they have these opposite leaves in these right angles that kind of look like a cross when you're looking down on it. Don't have a picture of that angle, but this hopefully gives you an idea. And lavender, it's a perennial, so it is alive throughout all four seasons of the year. It generally is dormant in the winter and it flowers in the summer. And it really likes those hot, dry Mediterranean climates that have a dry summer and a wet winter. And it's very tolerant of drought. In the relationship to the environment window, too, I mean, this isn't obviously wild, naturally growing lavender. Lavender is extensively farmed by humans. So these are rows that were created to grow them. And when I look at the four elements, and so this is sort of continuing the discussion from yesterday, there's really no hard right and wrong answers here, but the I like to look at, well, how many indicators are there for each element, and then I can see what are the most predominant ones. So that's how I look at it. And with the lavender, I think that the air is really predominant because of that upright gesture reaching towards the heavens, because it has very thin leaves that have lots of spaciousness around them. It's also very dry, and I correlate that with the air element. And then the way it's used, it's dispersed in the air for its scent in various ways. So it's definitely got an affinity with being in the air and being an air plant. But it also has a fire signature because of that strong scent, that strongly scented resinous quality that it has, and that's can typically be correlated with the fire element, and it has that tolerance of hot and dry climates. I think there's less of an earth element, even though it's part of the Lamiaceae family and it has those square stems. Um, and then even less of a water element, really kind of a lack of a water element, except if you consider the color. Um, Depending on how blue it is, blue can be, an indicator of the water element. But with lavender in general, it runs this gamut between blue of a, we'll talk about that in a minute with the color, but there can be pink in there, which is also a derivative of red. So that also, it kind of balances it out, in my mind. And the other kingdoms of nature, I mean, lavender has been used for with alongside honeybee, uh, uh, honey cultivation, I guess you could say, because there's this mutual relationship. It's called mutualism, and the bee, that's where both parties get something great out of the deal, where the flowers make this abundant nectar and the bees love to make honey with it. In return, they're pollinating the flowers. And it makes a very nice tasting honey. If you've ever had lavender honey, they try to put the hives out here right next to the crops and so that they can get that flavor. Interestingly, it's lavender also is a deterrent for certain insects like mosquitoes and moths and fleas and ticks. And so that is, it is used in that way as well. And then we've just had we as humans have had this such a long-standing relationship for thousands of years, for a myriad of uses, which we'll get into. So this color, what's so unique about the lavender plant is the lavender is also the name of a color. And like I was saying, it's sort of this cross between a light blue and a light magenta pink. Usually, again, depending on the species of the plant, that can and other myriad other factors, that color can vary. It can be more blue, it can be more purple, it can be lighter, and it can be darker. Um, but color is probably one of the most subjective windows. Uh, there's some common associations with it. Obviously, some that go with its usage, the soothing and the relaxing and therapeutic pieces of it, especially. And it's when you go and look at any kind of color wheels or for online colors, for graphics or for paint chips or anything like that, there's all of these variations of lavender. So it's really special in that plant, we've noticed as humans how special that color is and named a color for it and name many variations of that color for it. So I don't know if you'll find that much elsewhere, but that is something that really I think makes it stand out in its specialness. Boy, and here's where lavender starts to really shine in that sense perception with its fragrance. And it can be sweet and floral, herbal and green and soft with powdery notes, depending on the species. Some can be more soft and some can be more harsher or camphoraceous. Um, it has a really interesting taste. It's used in culinary uses, but a very little goes a long way. It can easily take over a dish. Um, and it has softness in its texture due to all of its fine hairs. And what gives it its scent are these chemical substances. So since this is used as an essential oil, and it's one of the probably most popular essential oils in the world. It's probably one of the most studied essential oils in the world. There's a lot of information about this. The two most prominent constituents that the volatile oils have for lavender, and especially this species, Lavandula angustifolia, is linalool acetate and linalool, and those are the ones that give it that soft powdery note. Those are the ones that give it that really calming and sedating effect of the essential oil. Medicinally, this plant has been used since antiquity, and it really shines as a nervine tonic. It's the treatment of nervous system complaints, anxiety, depression, insomnia, headaches. It can also be used for skincare, for inflammation, and for its antimicrobial effects. But the fresh flowers are used to make the beautiful essential oil, and the dried flowers are used for teas, for tinctures. Um, Here we have the eye pillow, and that is an actually interestingly, it's not a modern use, even though you will see it very popular still today, but something that's been used for centuries as a way to reduce headaches. And then there's that affinity with cleaning products as well. That lore, as I said, since antiquity, this plant has been used and venerated. It was found in King Tutankhamun's tomb when they opened it in the 1920s. They found dried lavender that still had a scent, which is incredible. And it was used extensively with Roman bathing, the bathhouses, with washing clothes. The word itself, lavender, comes from a Latin lavar, meaning to wash. And it had there's a lot of lore in around the Middle Ages with how it's been used for protection and purity and preventing evil spirits from entering buildings, from preventing evil fits. And even Hildegard of Bingen, who was a 12th century polymath that gave us so much in terms of music and herbs and other writings, talks about it curbing very many evil things. And so I also, in light of our earlier conversation, that term evil in the olden times, it could it could mean headaches. It could mean we don't really know what they meant. It could be a way of looking at bad energy. Could it have been talking about um, plague and diseases? They used it to ward off plague. Could it have been used for nightmares? Like all of the things that might have been attributed to quote unquote evil. So when we look at this lore and mythology, that's something to keep in mind. It might not necessarily be what in modern times we think of when we hear that word. And lastly, we um, want to make sure to remember that attunement is also a part of this. And I sat with a lavender plant in 2015 and did some attunement with it. And so I wanted to just bring that in as an example, not as this is the letter of the word, what lavender is for. In fact, the plant I sat with was Lavandula dedentata, not the one that the Flower Society uses. But I got a very clear messaging about how it's about letting go of tension in that's being carried from the past or being pulled in from the future. So it's really to me about being in the present moment, and that time itself, again, the sort of past, present, future, uh, in correlation with time is sort of a something that I was getting from it, in that it can slow down when you're enjoying the moment. So you actually do have time to slow down if you can enjoy the moment. And there's a cleansing aspect too that I felt from it, with those accumulated energies that we might have been holding on to. And when we can let those go, then our mind body complex can relax and make space for spirit to come in. So when we look at all of these together, this is when we can just start seeing that holistic picture of the plant and look and see, well, what reinforces itself? Are there patterns? Um, what of all of this can it tell me? What is the story of this plant? But also, we can remember that it's not like a puzzle that we have to put together, like a thousand-piece puzzle, that at the end we have this perfect picture. It may be that all of those pieces lay mixed up on the table until we get that right moment to use it. And that right moment is when we are working with somebody or ourselves, and we see something that resonates with one of these pieces, one or more of these pieces, but maybe just one. So this research tells us, it gives us that rather than a key that answers all the questions, it's more like a a piece of the puzzle that just fits into the place when it's needed. It's more like um, a way of connection, and that's what we are, right? We are matchmakers. So I look at this as a way of getting that living information of that plant within us, so that when the time comes, it just connects. It just fits together. Um, And when we then look at the description that the Flower Essence Society has created for this flower essence, now when you read it after having this intimate um, information about the plant, this knowledge about the personality of this plant and everything that we've looked at in such a very short time, when they say it promotes spiritual sensitivity as a highly refined awareness intact with stable bodily health, that one sentence is really packed with a lot of information. I mean, the spiritual sensitivity, we're talking about the that air element and that rising to the heavens and that highly refined awareness um, with the highly refined aroma, perhaps, and it wor- how it helps us have this brings it into our body. So we're helping to bring the spiritual connection into our body in a healthy way. Perhaps this is just, it's like reading artwork, you might have a different interpretation. But I think that these descriptions can come to life a lot more after the study of the plants, which is why we love teaching about the plants. And interestingly, too, they talk about in the flower essence repertory, there's a little bit more information under the patterns of imbalance and qualities. And it talks first about how it first soothes, like that's the first thing it does. And then it teaches one how to moderate and regulate spiritual psychic energy in order to come into balance. So that one really resonates with me as well after the study that I've done. And here is what Patricia has come up with for the affirmation. I allow gentle waves of soothing relaxation to wash over me. I let thoughts of the spirit seep gently into my awareness. I flow with ease between the earthly world and the lofty spirit heights. And so and I hope that as you've felt this affirmation, you can kind of see it and feel it in your body and soul, that flowing with ease between the earthly world and lofty spirit heights after we've looked at the way lavender helps connect us to do that. And that's, well, what I have for lavender.